Good morning, everyone. It's Jason. I'm one of the pastors here at Compassion Church. I'm thankful for you joining me this morning. Thank you for taking a part. As I get a chance to do these over the next few days, I'm talking about how does a believer live in a culture that is corrupt, lives in a culture that's not formed by God, but formed by the desires of men. Corrupt culture, I think we can all agree, is the enemy of God. Corrupt culture always works against God. If believers aren't preserving a culture, or if we aren't making it better, then it will always move away from the things of God. Culture will always try to go in the opposite direction of what God desires. I want to ask you something in light of that, though. Are our fellow human beings, and by fellow human beings, I mean those who are lost, those who are not saved, those who are not Christians, are they our enemy? Are they a result of the culture, or are they a part of the culture? Are they the ones we're fighting against? Ephesians 6:12 answers this for us. It says, "For we're not fighting against flesh and blood enemies, but against evil rulers and authorities of the unseen world, against mighty powers in this dark world, and against evil spirits in heavenly places." Many translations use the word struggling. We're struggling not against enemies of flesh and blood. But yet, so many believers do that every day. They come home exhausted. They come home emotionally spent. And even at that time, they get on Facebook and they get on social media and continue to fight enemies of flesh and blood. If that's you, if you've spent so much time with logical arguments, you've spent so much time trying to persuade with intellectual arguments, you spent so much time arguing against your fellow human being that you're trying to force them to understand things the way you see it, you're fighting against enemies of flesh and blood, and it is a battle not worth fighting. Our culture war, that's not against other people. Jesus saw this. He understood this. When he saw the people, he saw them as souls. He didn't see other people as the ones he was battling against. He saw them as the spoils of war, the ones he was trying to win. That was what he was fighting the war for. So instead of fighting against our fellow man, we should be fighting to win for them. We're fighting a different kind of war. You saw who Jesus was friends with, who he went after. He went after prostitutes. He went after sinners. He went after tax collectors. Do you know who the tax collectors of our day and time are? It's not the IRS. Most of you listening to me right now have never had to deal with the IRS. You might have gotten a letter from them, but most people don't have interaction with them, so they're not the tax collectors of this time. The tax collectors of this time that's the guy that calls you on the phone and says, "Hey, I want to talk to you about your car's warranty." That's the guy that calls you on the phone and says, "Hey, I see that your computer's broken." That's the guy who calls you on the phone and says, "There's been a problem with your social security number and it's now been suspended." Tax collectors and today's scammers are one and the same. That's who Jesus was going after. That's who he was fighting for. That's who he was trying to win as his spoils of war. This changes everything. It changes everything in our cultural fight. It changes our perception. It changes the way we see the culture. It also changes the weapons we should be using. So instead of using intellectual arguments, instead of trying to build an argument of logic that'll really prove what we're saying, instead of trying to use insults to tear others down, we have to use spiritual weapons, because our enemy, who is behind the culture, is a spiritual one. We have to use weapons such as praise, faith, the blood of Jesus, prayer, and the gifts, the spiritual gifts that God's placed within us. Remember who you're fighting. As you go out there in the culture today and you get ready to fight the cultural war, take the right weapons with you. Use them in your fight. And I really believe that using those weapons, God will give you victory. He will make things happen. God bless you. Have an awesome day.